All right, guys. Before we get into this, all hype aside, I think we need to adjust the elephant in the room. For those of you who see my Twitter, let's get into it.
I need all the wins, yeah. Ain't no L's, I gotta get a no call and quits, yeah. Gotta keep on moving no matter how hard.
Here comes Danny Tucci-Zala, back to Baker, Baker with the fin. Kurt Baker in for DC, and this may well do it old glory with the try. The New Zealand Sevens legend, Kurt Baker with the cherry on top.
Can you believe it?
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the On the Line Rugby podcast, a show brought to you by the Believe Sports Network. I'm your host, Mike Nagaishi, and welcome back. I'm sorry about having our Friday episode get a little derailed. I was underneath the weather, still kind of am on the home stretch, but we're working through this and we'll see what happens with audio. So if I do sound a little trash, that's probably why. I think we need to adjust the elephant in the room. As the host, I don't believe that myself should be the news, but I think this is worth talking about as it not only affects me, but affects others, not only in my space, but to you, my viewers who have followed me either from my work in the football world or my work in the rugby world. This is important for you to talk about amongst yourselves. For those of you who did not know, Rugby Pass was brought out by World Rugby. They now own basically 95 to 99% of all media outlets in the rugby world. For better or for worse, I think their curation of it through myself and others has been done independently and without bias. And I think that lends credence to how World Rugby is letting us have full creative control over damn near all the accounts. It's a hard job, but yeah, I definitely love it. I think it's a dream come true for me, and I'm sure for the rest of my coworkers would feel the same as well. For those of you who have followed my work through the Rugby Network, unfortunately, that work will come to an end. Twitter saw it first. It has caused a little bit of a stir to the point where I actually was asked by my superiors to then delete the news, as the MLR did complain about a possible feeling of burning bridges. So that's why my tweets on the matter have disappeared, unfortunately. So for perpetuity, for those who didn't read it or have not heard about it, I will talk about it here. It's a sad day, It's been a sad week. Got called into a meeting last week, I think. And we've known this for quite some time, that the MLR would have to drastically rethink their proposition of keeping TRN or the Rugby Network, the domestic streaming platform for America's rugby viewership, to either go to someone else or stay in the MLR's hands or keep with us at Rugby Pass. And, there was a lot of conversations behind the scenes that I was not a part of with my higher ups on the matter. And we were given bits and pieces of it. I think the biggest thing that we took away from it was that we had to beat our social targets that we had. We've beaten them every year. We smashed them out of the park this year. 350,000 people just in 1 month alone would view our TikToks. Our Instagram was popping off with almost 1,000+ likes on everything and that we posted, whether it be memes, whether it be highlight videos. A lot of people may see the creative differences between the social output. And I think that's because it's not only me running. Well, it wasn't not only me running it. It was 4 other people. So obviously creative styles come into different display. For those of you who did not know, I did do the socials for TRN as well. I was the one who was doing the kind of the letter to the DJ effects and kind of interesting transitions here and there, kind of off brand for a lot of the stuff that was on TRN, but I'm glad that a lot of my viewers did enjoy it. Coming down the line, we then blew past that social target out of the water. Our contract was supposed to end, I believe, on November 1st. At least that was the proverbial date. Starting at about on August 24th, there was a couple meetings thrown out there that they did not want editorial on the site, specifically citing 2 articles of mine because of being critical just of league moves, whether it was the streaming acquisition of Rugby Pass TV and how it could affect TRN. And ironically, I did not realize it, but I got 100% of my predictions accurate, with the Premiership. For all those who read the article, thank you for reading it. Super Rugby's coming down the line. They may acquire that too. Who knows? So far we're 1 of 1 on predictions for that article. I think that article has aged very well. And a couple league trades, including the fantasy article that was cited as not being what the league was looking for in terms of editorial. And it was ironically only circulated to the director of projects, who did not read it, surprisingly, I'm assuming because of World Cup prep. And so it did not get down to the rest of us, but that was revealed early. Last week, I had 3 articles pulled, again, for the same reason of critical moves that weren't exactly what they were looking for MLR standpoint. And we finally learned that the contract was being pulled a month in advance because of that. And supposedly, I guess we had hit a nerve in the league office. I'm not sure. But during the summer, it was widely known, at least on Twitter, that we had trouble with our draft coverage and putting it out on the site. For a team of 11 people running this account for TRN and others, it was a hard week trying to explain to people that it was kind of out of our hands. The league blocked us out of all their draft coverage. All draft assets didn't come to us till, what was it, like, I think 7 days after the draft. And then we got draft highlight assets. And most of them were just screen recordings taken off of their the players' YouTube accounts. They weren't even like hardcore quality film. So the quality of what you guys got for their draft highlights was kind of low. And that's the reason why. And we weren't able to get certain tournaments on the site. We had website issues. Ironically, it was because someone from the MLR's marketing team had gotten access to our site and was kind of messing things about. I don't really know the whole story of it, so I won't exactly tell it, but I will say I was extremely disappointed to hear that. Then last week was the biggest one. They had cut at least all access to all news on the site. I think that was the big part of what made TRN a better platform than just being a streaming platform for all those who didn't read. I guess it's a symptom of the internet to only read the headline and not read the rest of it for whatever reason. I think these people should go back to English class, but I'm not going to try not to get too passionate about it. But it's just been a difficult time just trying to process the lack of editorial access. I believe that, as a journalist, you're entitled to unbiased, unfiltered coverage that criticizes teams when they're down and picks up teams where they're good, covers the news rather than just PR pieces. Originally 2 years ago, when I was hired to do with my counterparts to do the news for the site, it was really just about, they said full creative control, but that the MLR had wanted to do almost like a rugby dump article style, like under 300-400 words, include a meme in it, maybe a video, and almost like do like press release, like, oh, this dude hit like 400 pounds in the bench press. I obviously didn't want to do that. I believe that more conversations are better held, whether it's breaking down a play or explaining a trade and how stupid or great it was, means a lot more to fans. And that's what I and my counterparts had strived to do, to kind of tell stories and narratives based off of that. Obviously there was more stuff to it. There was supposed to be a fantasy side of the site that got taken down. It was lost in development. We had a bunch of other stuff. It wasn't just streaming. I'm going to emphasize that again. It wasn't just streaming, but for better or for worse, our run has ended. We were unceremoniously on this meeting told to transfer all assets to the MLR marketing people who will now be taking over the account. So you will be seeing a different vibe on all the channels, and it's not us. We've lost access. They've changed the passwords, the whole nine. So unfortunately, the fun-loving TRN on the edge maybe have hit a nerve. We've had a lot of notifications of that from the league office, ironically, but not from the teams. The teams have loved our content, for humorous as it was, and I'm sad to see it go. But in reality, you guys deserve more unfiltered content that I think needs to spark more conversations. And I feel like that's not only a path for the league to improve, for us to improve, and as readers or viewers of the content, for you to have your own conversations and make up your own opinions. And that will continue through here, and ideally through my site. I realized it's in desperate need of an update. So instead of putting written content on there immediately, I will be putting a pause on that, and we'll see what happens in terms of what platform I'll go to, and how gussied up I can do. Hopefully I can put up my whole portfolio of articles that I've done for rugby. Regardless, it's a dream come true that I get to work in this field, in this industry. Sports has always been my love. And while I'm being assigned to other projects after the World Cup, hopefully my superiors did not think that I caused that much of a stir. They didn't seem too upset about it. Honestly, they knew it came from a good place. But yeah, this has been an interesting couple weeks. So that's why I've been on pause. Now let's get back into happier things now. Let's get back into the nitty gritty of the World Cup. I think there's a lot of good narratives that need to have been discussed. Between Wales beating the brakes off of Australia and South Africa basically killing themselves against Ireland. I think there's a lot to take away from those. And I guess we'll start with Australia doing what Australia does, and ironically breaking my heart and stinking up the joint versus Wales. I don't really know what to say, but it is what it is. I think Australia has officially been written out, in my book at least, out of the World Cup quarterfinals appearance that I was hoping they would have. They looked lost. They looked broken by about the 28th to 47th minute when Gareth Anscombe scored that try, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. They definitely looked broken, and at the 27th minute when that first try was set up, it was over, I think, in their minds, and I think they just wanted to be off the field. They seem to have lost all confidence. The team looks, while they do fight, the team does look broken. And Eddie Jones is going to have to take a hard look in the mirror in the offseason as to see what happened and how they can improve. His reaction, though, to the losses that they've had is really emotional, and I think delves deep into what you would want in a head coach. I just hope that he doesn't lose the locker room in doing so. His biggest thing through the games, at least his takeaways were that, the original team that had played in the years before he came during the Rennie era was not up to snuff in terms of turning it around culture-wise and play-wise. So he brought in a lot of young faces, for better or for worse. And while it is a painful time, he did say that it's better to throw them to the wolves and get them that learning experience in these tough times, to learn how to be better and learn what to do rather than learning it in practice. A lot of people can take it both ways. You could say, sit them out, have them learn from film. Other people say, yeah, the only real experience you can get is minutes. And I do agree with that. And I think he's right. You have to go through the bad to experience the good. He's not going to be able to turn it around overnight. It's very hard to, at least. He's not his counterpart Warren Gatland, at least with a more loaded roster with more test experienced players. But I think they'll be better for it. At least I hope so. There's a lot of pieces on that roster who are effective footy players that I think will, down the line, that young talent will grow and foster into something great. Hopefully by the next World Cup in Australian soil, the host nation will be able to put their foot up and say, hey, we learned from Eddie, we're ready to roll, and the team will be better for it. But let's break down a couple plays that have happened during that game that I thought were really huge to me in terms of breaking the Australian mindset. I think the first thing that we need to look at is the 27th minute line-out try that they had off of Dan Biggar. It's a standard set-piece play, 5-man line-out. You're going to have your 3-man pod with a boss in the back, making it a pod of 4 of your Lucy pack. And then you're going to have a good couple backs covering behind Biggar, lining up off of him deep, that can make a play off of that. Biggar gets the ball from Gareth Davies, then tosses it out to the pod. pod sees an open hole that Australia fails to mark, and the captain, Jack Morgan, man, he hits a great line, inside ball, gets immediate pass, and takes that hole. Must have been 20 to 30 meters down the line. Fullback sees this Kellaway, I believe, and passes it easily off to Gareth Davies to set them up underneath the posts. That was a beautiful try, and I think it all breaks down into how Dan Biggar basically baited 3 people out of that lineup defense to then rush up and cover him. And Gareth Davies looping around created that kind of overlap where they couldn't commit to that line that Jack Morgan set up. And man, I think that was history right there in the making. I definitely think that Dan Biggar's almost revenge narrative of mindset, where, you know, taking apart teams with physicality and just being that enforcer on the pitch has really spread out to the rest of that locker room. You know, I think that Wales had a chance to make the World Cup final against my Springboks in the last World Cup, and they obviously got defeated by the kicking game. But they're coming back, man. I mean, hey, they could make a semifinal if they keep playing at this pace, in my book. But it's permeating, you know, everyone down to like the bench players are showing off that level of, we're going to fight to the bitter end. We're going to push our lineup to just bully you on the mark. And it's not going to stop in the forward pack. The backs are going to enjoy a little bit of ruck time too, which is what all forwards, I can attest to this, want to see more. And they're playing with a level of, you know, camaraderie and chemistry that I haven't seen in this World Cup outside of, I would say, maybe Samoa and Fiji, with what they bring to the table. You know, especially if you look at the 47th minute try that really broke the backs of all the Wallaby players. Guys are in Gareth Anscombe's face. He takes it right off the ruck from, I think it was Thomas Williams. He has 3 guys in his face, literally maybe a couple of feet. Probably could have blocked the kick if they were just a couple, you know, split seconds earlier. He spots the backfield open. Kellaway is not there, or I think maybe it was his replacement. I'm not sure. Is not there underneath the post. Drops a clever, cheeky little chip over that sets up a beautiful try that YOLOs them over. And man, I was just impressed, you know, with that performance. Gareth Anscombe and I think a few other players from New Zealand and Australia, you know, that just sells it right there that they should have been given caps in the jerseys, whether it was black or gold. You know, I think what Eddie said prior to his introduction into the World Rugby appearance in Australia was that, you know, Australia and New Zealand are like the farms for the best academies in the world, being the islands. And, you know, it shows up. You know, Bundy Aki, we'll talk about Ireland in just a bit, and Gareth Anscombe have been, and even James Lowe, and Mac Hansen, you know, highlights of their teams are showing up and showing out on the biggest stage for their ancestral nations. And wow, you know, they should have been given caps a long time ago. I'm sure this shows how deep both countries are in terms of talent, but hey, the overseas rules and other countries profiteering off of that, by all means, get some more parity. It upsets the power rankings a little bit, and I'm glad to see some other nations come out on top. But, you know, I think the biggest thing that shocked me this weekend was South Africa's controversy underneath the posts. I think that their biggest question moving into the World Cup has been amplified moving forward, is how they're going to have an answer at 10. You know, obviously you have 5 options off the boot. 6, actually. You have Faf de Klerk, you have Cheslin Kolbe, you have Monty LeBlanc, Damien Willemse, Andre Pollard when he gets back, hopefully by the next week, or Villy LaRue. But they all play different game styles. You know, obviously you have LeBlanc, who's more of a playmaker with the ball in hand. He's a great distributor as well. and he manages the space effectively. You have Handré Pollard, who is definitely the goal-kicking 10 in that South African space. I wouldn't exactly say he's the greatest at running with the ball or setting up playmaking. I think that's Willie LaRue's job when he's on the field, but he has effectiveness in that regard. Faf de Klerk and Cheslin Kolbe obviously are great off the tee, but that's more of a last resort, in my opinion. They did demonstrate that with Faf de Klerk taking a shot at the post. His did doink, I believe, twice. Shout out the Chicago Bears, shout out the Lions. Y'all know this all too well. It's painful, but it is what it is. And obviously you have Willie LaRue, but I think Willie LaRue is better suited in that space management backfield. Obviously, like I said, when Pollard is off the field. Willems obviously is a ball-in-hand player. He plays great with the space in hand, but I think he, because of that, needs to be slotted in at that 12 to 15 jersey rather than 10 because of his lack of management. You need to give him the ball in hand. He's a great runner with the ball, but he has a lot of deficiencies that have, I'm sure, been extrapolated at great detail that I couldn't do in that regard. Off the tee, there's not a lot of options, in terms of quality without Pollard, because if you look at the way the block play, they strive off of that tee performance that keep, shooting for shots at goal, take the penalties. And they don't have that Franz Stain, they don't have Mornay Stain, they don't have that Jordy Barrett level of clutchness when it comes to off the boot. And I don't know what they're going to do. You're going to want LeBlanc on the field to get that young kid minutes, but if he can't perform off the tee, it's worrisome. And I think that's why they've rushed to get Dion Fourie and they get Handré Pollard, back up to snuff, because teams will start to exploit that, especially moving forward down the line. And to have 11 points that could have won you the game handily missed off the tees is a huge hole. You're constantly having to go for tries now. You can't even take shots at the post. That takes away the biggest thing of South Africa's game. They play a slower game, which doesn't necessarily, I think, push itself over to tries, and their discipline at the breakdown because of that, to have to force these plays, has caused them to have just a spillover effect moving down throughout the World Cup in the way they play, and it's will continue to hurt them. And I think Ireland just sniffed blood in the water, and they came to play. We all know Ireland and Wales in the north are the physical units in that group. They're going to bring it to you in the trenches, but man, did they have all of their guys at play. James Lowe was hitting rucks. Mac Hansen was getting in the paint. It was a nasty game. They held up Eben Etzebeth at the crux of the game in the air. It was mostly backs in that quote unquote mall that wasn't really a mall. Come on, let's be real here. That was a big move for them, and the backs are leading the charge in this, and that's amazing for a forward to really watch and see. Again, like Wales, they're really transforming how they play, and I think Andy Farrell made a great game plan in this to cut off that 7-1 split off the bench that was the South African bomb squad. Because man, the Irish won this game fair and square. That's all I really have to give really to that. They got caught doing too much, and you can't be doing that. No matter how talented your team is, you can never be caught constantly looking for that home run, because you will just be cut in 1,000 pieces. It's what the Crusaders in New Zealand have done. It's what, if you look at Saracens or Leicester, it's what they've done very well, unfortunately to my Sharks' detriment. Pepperoni, but it is what it is. And I think it shows off of this setup try that Bundy Aki did in the 27th minute. He set up that Mac Hansen score in the corner at the bottom top of your screen. On the 27th minute, there was a scrum on the bottom of your screen far side, and man, it was set up to perfection. You had Monty LeBlanc lining up damn near tight to the scrum off of Faf de Klerk for whatever reason. I'm not even sure what he was thinking. Damien Delende is lining up a little bit more wide to hit that Gary Ringrose outside of the pod where he's supposed to be lined up. Labak would technically be in charge of the point man. In that case, it was Bondi Aki. He does not line up and instead lines up behind Faf de Klerk. Jamison Gibson Park throws the ball to Aki. There's a giant hole. Obviously, Dale Lindy tries to cut off the space, but because of having to play two men, Ringrose and Aki, he plays that in-between space almost to kind of read where he's going to go. Labak is trying to rush over to cover the space that he just left open. Takes a horrible angle at Aki. Aki bumps him off, traditional as to what he does. And de Klerk, because of that angle and on the hit that Labak tried to take, can't get around him by the time that happens. And him and Dale Lindy are caught in no man's land, basically, leaving Bundy Aki to just rip roar through the space and set up Mac Hansen in the corner after a couple of phases down deep. That honestly, actually, Johnny Sexton could have scored. But I think that just shows what the Labak are left with. You're constantly with either young players or playmakers with the ball in hand that aren't necessarily the greatest on defense or great off the tee or whatever. And because of that, you're forced to then hope that the rest of your team can supplement around those deficiencies, and the Bach just haven't been able to do that. They've been broken off of what they traditionally consider their game, and I think that leaves a lot to be desired moving forward. But we'll see what happens. There's a lot more things to talk about. Obviously, there's some MLR news I would like to talk about, but we've run out of time today. I'll try to get to it on Friday and hopefully have a reaction for New Zealand's game versus, I believe they face, let's see, it's not Namibia. They face, I'm hitting a blank here, but the All Black reaction will be coming on Friday. A whole bunch of MLR news. Hope to see you there. Thanks for staying with me, and see you next time.